and welcome to this afternoon session. I guess Gil will be saying good morning in a minute because it's morning where he is, afternoon where we are. But this is our masterclass on the making of the sustainable, inclusive cities. My name is Christine Murray. I'm the director of the Festival of Place, and I'd like to welcome you here today. Before we kick off this session, I'm just going to give you a lightning tour of where we are in case this is your first time on AirMeet. Most of you will know the drill, but if you want to send an emoji, which we like, they're just below me. There's a happy face. You can choose one that suits your mood, a round of applause, that's great, and some hearts. If you would like to participate in the live chat, it's a great place to share comments, feedback, and to share links and other resources. Thank you for the hearts and the thumbs up. Thank you. You can reach over to the far side and you can find the chat there, just in between the attendees and the questions bubbles. If you click on the attendees, you can see the names of other people who are here. I like the list view, so if you click on the list view, you can see people's headshot and their job title and their name. And you can also actually, you have a speech bubble next to that, so you can actually send them a direct chat. If you receive a direct chat, you actually need to accept it first before you can see the message. So you may get a notification at the top of your chat under direct. And if you click that and accept it, you can see the message from somebody who says, hey, great to see you here. I'll meet you at the table later. Underneath the chat, you've got a speech bubble with a question mark on it. If you go into that and you find this session, you can look down till you find 9th of November Masterclass and you click into that. That's where your questions go. I know Gil's going to be taking several kind of Q&A bits as we work through today and tomorrow's program. So without further ado, Gil Penalosa is founder and chair of 880 Cities and an ambassador for World Urban Parks. He is passionate about creating cities for all people. He has inspired and advised decision makers in more than 350 different cities around the world about how to create vibrant cities with healthy communities where all people can live happier and healthier lives, regardless of their age, gender, or socioeconomic and ethnic status. So it's really a great pleasure to welcome you here. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Christine. It's great to be here. And I think even under such horrible conditions due to the virus, it has actually shown us that we need better places, better communities, places where it's easier to live healthier and happier, and where cities are going to be more sustainable or more equitable. Let me share the screen because I want to...
Yes, you go ahead and then I'm going to give you the floor, but I'll be back to help facilitate some of the conversations, but I'll just make sure it's all showing well for you. And yeah, nice big round of applause. It's really great. It's in Toronto and I'm in... It is just, you just need to go, that's it, it's perfect. Good view. Well done.
Okay. Thank
you.
See
you soon.
Thanks, Christine. You know, there are some issues, such as extreme poverty, population growth, housing, sprawl, lack of sustainable mobility, lack of quality environment, public places, and more. But these issues came up in 1976, almost 40 years ago. 40 years ago was the UN Conference on Human Settlements, where UN Habitat was created. And I was very close to it because in some ways I was, I was very close to it because my father was Undersecretary General of the UN, and as Undersecretary General, he was in charge of organizing this conference. And he visited over 95% of the countries at that time. And he was sharing comments and ideas on what he saw, what was happening, the issues of poverty and so on. And actually, it took place in Vancouver about 40 years ago. And something might have been in the air because afterwards, my brother and I attended, and he became mayor twice in Bogota. And over the last 25 years, I have worked in over 350 different cities in all continents, small ones, rich ones, poor ones, in every continent with different weathers and different climates. And our mother has always been a landscape gardener. She turned 90 last week. She's been also a teacher, an artist. So part of it is a little bit of our background. But when we think of the creation of UN Habitat and what was happening in that UN conference 4 decades later, are we better off? I don't know. It seems almost like a multiple choice. In some ways, some people say the world is much better than 40 years ago. Others might say the world is awful. Others, they say the world can be much better. And think about what are your thoughts on this? Others might be saying all of the above, which is right. The world can be much better than 40 years ago. Look at the extreme poverty. What has happened is amazing. In only 40 years, we went from 4 out of 10 people living under $2 per day to less than 1 out of 10. And this will even disappear within the next 10 years. The world's death of children, almost by every cause, has gone substantially down. Very good news. The level of life expectancy. Only 200 years ago, the rate is less than 40 years. There was not one single country that had a life expectancy above 40 years. Today, we don't have any country with a life expectancy below 40, and most are in the 70s and 80s. The world health life expectancy is around 70. And if the people that reach 60, their life expectancy is 80. So we're living much longer everywhere. But also, some of you might have thought the world is awful. Well, you are also right. I mean, we got climate change and we see the symptoms everywhere. Then there are so many people dying of issues that should be avoided. High blood pressure, smoking, pollution, obesity, alcohol use, all of this. No one should be dying because of that. The obesity is a huge epidemic. And actually with COVID, other than the very older, the number one link is obesity. And the reality is that 40 years ago, there was almost no obesity around the world. And now it's almost spread most places around the world. We still have about 1 billion people that do not have access to clean water and 2.4 billion that do not have access to sanitation. That's about 30%. That's 1 out of 3 people do not have access to going to the toilet and being able to have sanitation. The index of inequality, it's also very bad, especially in emerging countries, Latin America and Africa and some countries in Asia. But also some of you might have thought that we can be much better. Yes, the world population, look at how it has grown over the last 12,000 years. The reality that it has really grown is in the last couple of 100 years. Other than that, it was very, very stable for a long time. What happened? The population growth, there are two things that are different. One is the population growth rate, how fast it's growing, and the other one is the population growth. Fortunately, the population growth peaked at around 1985. And since then, it's gone down. But since there's still a lot of children and youth, it's going to continue to grow for another 30, 40, 50 years. But then it's going to stabilize. It's going to stay. So that is a major. I would say that from all of the issues that we were having 40 years ago when Habitat was created, the number one that really has been very positive is to being able to level the population. Why did the population grow so much? Basically, because people stopped dying when they were little kids. People used to have 10, 12 kids, but only 2 or 3 would survive. The other 9, 10 would die. So people would have a lot of kids. They only wanted 2 or 3, but they needed to have 10 or 12 to have 2 or 3 alive. Then with clean water in most places, the 3 big issues was clean water, sanitation in many places, and vaccination. All of a sudden, 100 years ago, people stopped dying when they were little kids. And a lot of people, if they wanted to have 3 kids, they didn't need to have 12. So they started having 10, 8, 6, and so on. So this is what happened. But it took some time. children stopped dying little by little, and it took a couple of generations for people to realize, oh, I don't need to have 9 or 8 or 10 if I want 2 or 3. And then, so that was the gap when the population grew a lot. But now, fortunately, that has stabilized, and we have few children dying, but also they're living much longer. That's why the life expectancy is longer. So this issue of having clean water, sanitation in many places, and vaccination, it made all of the difference for children to stop dying. So now people don't have 10 and 12 children when they want to have 2 or 3. They just have 2 or 3, and the 2 or 3 most likely will survive. This is the projection of the world population till to the year 2100. It's gonna, across all ages are gonna grow, but mostly it's gonna grow the people over 60, over 70, over 80, over 90, over 100. The people in the UK that are being born today, the babies being born today, half are going to live over 100, half. And they can live healthier and happier. So we have an urban world. Now, around the world, more than half of the people live in urban areas. And in the quote-unquote developed world, more than 80% of the people live in urban areas. And why are people going to the urban areas? Basically, because there is better quality of life. I mean, people are not going to the urban areas because they are dumb. It's because they go to the urban areas because they feel that they can have a better life for their children. They can have better education and better health facilities, and better possibilities of jobs, and different variety of work. And look, when people are moving into the cities, like the people that were able to read or write, all of a sudden it goes to almost 100% as the world urbanizes. And it's not because the rural areas are running out of people. No, the rural areas also have been growing the population, but the majority of the new growth has gone to cities. So it's not that all of a sudden, the rural areas are going to be empty. No, they have continued to grow, but the major population growth is urban. And in urban areas, look what happens all of the sudden. Cellular. 20 years ago, we didn't have any cellular communication. Today, almost, we see everybody, huge, high percentages. The share of population using internet, how we are communicating. Just imagine for a second this crisis if we had not had internet. So this is, the world is changing. The things that were bad. Remember that we mentioned that 2.5 billion people did not have access to sanitation. That was about 1 out of 3. Well, only 30 years ago, it was half of the world population. Half did not have sanitation. We have gone from 48% to 32%, and hopefully it will go down to close to 0 soon. So this afternoon in the UK, morning in Toronto, we're going to talk about cities. And I wanted to give you a little bit this appetizer of the world situation of how we are. But I want you to think for a minute. Half of the homes that will be around in the cities, half of the homes in the urban area that we'll have in 40 years do not exist today. Today we have about 3.5 billion people living in cities. Within the lifetime of our children, we're going to go to 7 billion. 7 billion. This is in the next 40 years. And how do we want to live? We need to have a shared vision of how do we want to live. It could be very nice and civilized. Mobility could be people walking and riding bicycles and using public transit. We could have all people enjoying nature, close to home, at home, in the sidewalks, in the schools, in the places of work, everywhere. So we got a magnificent opportunity. Imagine we have like a magic wand. Half of the homes that will be around. But also we have a huge responsibility, because whatever we do or don't do in the next 40 years is where people are going to live for hundreds and hundreds of years. So if that's going to happen in the next 40 years, let's see what we have done in the last 40. Because if what we've been doing is good, okay, let's just do more of the same. Unfortunately, in the last 40 years, this is how we've been doing cities. We've been segregating people, sending the poor people to the poor places, to the worst places where there are no mobility, no parks, no trees, where it's even in the U.S., the wealthiest country in the world. This is the U.S. Some U.S. cities by postal code. By postal code, the postal codes that are in dark red, their life expectancy is 60. In light pink is 90. Can you even imagine? How could this even be possible that if you, by luck or bad luck, you happen to be born in one neighborhood, your life expectancy is going to be 60. If you happen to be born 10 minutes away, it's going to be 90. And not only 60, but those 60 with very rough quality of life. Practically no places to play, no parks, no playgrounds, gangs, unsafe. So, I mean, this should be totally unacceptable. I mean, in the last 40 years, we've been focusing on cars, and not on people's happiness. And this is how we're trying to solve mobility. And even investing billions and billions on this, we haven't even solved mobility. This is Florence, Italy, and one high intersection of the same scale. It seems like we learn how to do cities, and all of a sudden we unlearn. So we need to change. The cities don't decide the what, the amount of population. That's more at the national level, but the cities do decide the how. In many places around the world, this is how we've been doing cities in the last 40 years. No trees, no parks. Actually, instead of parks, we've been doing parking lots for cars. Imagine if you are a small child or an elderly person, a person with disabilities, you become kind of like a slave to someone with a car just to go out for an ice cream. I mean, last week you had Tim Gil doing a magnificent workshop and presentation, and he showed how in the last 3 generations, all of a sudden we lost the space, the room to roam. Just 3 generations ago, people could roam kilometers around their home without any concern. And now it's very, very little area. Before, the people of my generation, our parents used to say, oh, go out, don't come back till dinner time. Now they want to keep them inside. Part of it is because the cars are going too fast. Part of it is because of the built environment that we've done some arterials that are gigantic. And part of it is also perceived, is mental. We see so many issues in the media that we get scared of a child being killed by a car, even if it happened 10,000 miles away in another continent. But so part of it is perceived. But of course, all of this, we need to work and we need to improve. So the last 40 years have not been very good. We need to do things differently. We need to improve the cities that we have today. We need to create great cities for many, many more people. But we must create cities radically different. Radically different. We must plan cities radically different. We must manage cities radically different. It's not just a little bit trick or there. No, it has to be very, very different. It doesn't matter if the city, if you come from a city that has 2,000 people or 500,000 or 5 million or 10 million, it doesn't matter. What I'm talking about this afternoon is the issues are similar. The solutions are different. We need public transit in the city of 10,000 people. We need public transit in the city of 10 million. It's going to be different public transit. In the city of 10,000, we might need a few buses. In the city of 10 million, we might need trains. But the issues are similar. We got public health crisis now. Mental, physical, emotional. We got issues of equity. The population is growing in so many cities around the world. We are living longer. And it's not just in the UK. Look at this. 200 years ago, not all the circles are the countries in the world. There was not a single country with a life expectancy above 45. Today we don't have one below 45. Climate change. We see the symptoms everywhere. Even if some people don't want to believe in them. Climate change is there. What does this have to do with cities? That in the cities where there is density, such as this is Chicago, the blue area, with the lowest impact is where there is density. As you start to sprawl, the impact on climate change is huge. So we need cities to be denser. Ideally, the population growth, as we double the population living in cities, ideally should be in the existing footprint. We should have kind of like a belt around cities, wherever the cities are, and have all of the growth in the existing footprint. And as we're thinking about climate change and all of these new challenges, COVID-19 arrived. Some people say that all change. I think that more than all change is the perception change. Unfortunately, most things have not changed, but our perception changed. It's like if we had a magnifying glasses, for example, to see equity. In some cities, like this one, we see they thought the best place to have homeless is to paint rectangles on parking lots where they would be physically distanced. 90% of the hotel beds in that city are empty. How can we allow to have homeless people sleeping on the pavement in the parking lots when 90% of the hotel rooms are empty? Also, we saw some positive signs. When fewer people were using cars, all of a sudden the quality of the air was much better. So do we want to go back to this, or do we want to have cleaner air? It's up to all of us. I think we need to work on a post-COVID that is healthier, where we have more equity, more sustainability. When I'm talking about health, I'm talking about the definition of the World Health Organization. It's the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It's not about just the lack of disease. So a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And when I'm talking about sustainability, I like the definition of sustainable happiness by Dr. Catherine O'Brien. She says, sustainable happiness is the happiness that contributes to the individual, the community, and the global well-being, as long as it does not exploit other people, the environment, or future generations. And about equity, it's about giving everybody what they need to be successful, which is very different from equality. Equality is giving everybody the same. It's like if we are having some people doing a 100-meter race, and some people are starting at the 90-meter, and some are starting at the 0, maybe with their shoes untied. We say, okay, now it's going to be equality. You can have your shoes untied. But if some people are starting with 90 meters of advantage, it's not equity. So we need to have equity. Robert Wood Johnson did this drawing, which is nice. It's about equality. It's giving everybody the same bicycle. No, some people are short, some people are tall, some people are skinny, some people are heavy, some people have disabilities. So it's not about giving everybody the same. It's about giving everybody what they need. So there's a big difference between equity and equality. And we need to think of that in our cities. We must ensure equity before we can actually have equality. So we need to work on equity. Everything we do in our cities and everywhere should have equity as kind of like an umbrella. So I was saying that we have a great opportunity and responsibility. Some people are saying, oh, everything is going to change because they have seen some pop-ups and some urban guerrilla transformations. And they say, oh, this one runs on money and makes you fat. The other one runs on fat and makes you money. And now we're going to have everything green and bike lanes. Not so fast. It's there's just as many people that are thinking I'm going to be more isolated. I want to have more cars. I want to live further away from anybody. So it's up to us. It's going to be very, very hard. If we want people to live healthier and happier, if we want our cities to be more equitable and sustainable, we need to work very, very hard now, not post-COVID. All of the changes, we need to start now. And that is something that is very, very critical on this. Or else we might end up having a worse world than what we had before COVID. It's not going to be just by magic that things are going to be better. Let's think, how do we want to live? I mean, if we want children to walk to school, we want to have small schools so that the catchment area is small. If we continue to amalgamate schools all over the place and have gigantic schools, they're going to be driven to schools. So how do you want the cities in the UK and everywhere, whatever people are watching today from, how do you want your cities to become? That is the key question. That's why the Festival of Place comes at such an important time. It was going to happen anyway, but now with COVID, it's even more important. because all of these issues that we are talking about, because of this opportunity. In some ways, the festival of place is helping us to visualize life past COVID. We cannot forget how we were. We cannot accept that most of the political leaders around the world, they're almost praying to go back to how we were. No, we need to change the way of doing things. We need to do something better if we want cities to be equitable and sustainable, if we want people to live healthier and happier. So I want to take you through 8 messages. Today is going to be half of them. Tomorrow, same time, the other half. Today, at the end, we're going to have a time for questions. Also, we're going to have time to work in small groups. And tomorrow, we're going to start with the feedback from that. So the first message is that it's not about money. It's not about money. They will always say, oh, we don't have money. And you see that they're doing flyovers, elevated highways, and all kinds of things. No, it's about vision and action. In my previous life, I was commissioner in Bogota. And I learned that it was not about the money. And I've been doing, I work now with more than 350 different cities advising, but before that I was doing. For example, we built over 200 parks in one term, all over the city, small ones, big ones, medium ones. This was one of them. The Simon Bolivar, it was before, and then the Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people, and then the Pope left, and nothing happened. There were not even pavements, sidewalks, nothing in 27 years. Why nothing happened? Because change is hard. Change is hard in Bogota or in London or in Bristol or in Copenhagen or in Nairobi. Change is hard everywhere. Because when you try to change, the cave people show up. Who are the cave people? You know them because they're everywhere. They are the citizens against virtually everything. Everything. But then we need to be prepared for this. We cannot accept no for an answer. We got to find that little crack through the window and run through it. We must find solutions to the problems, not problems to the solutions. So it was like this for 27 years, and in less than 4 years, we turned it into this, a magnificent park for people of all ages and abilities and backgrounds, rich and poor and everybody, and the uses and the activities, some things that people can do on their own, other things that people can do with thousands of others. And it's not only about active, it's also passive and contemplative. Tomorrow we're going to talk a lot about parks and public places, and we are going to talk about what makes parks great, because it's about people that parks are great. It's not about winning architectural awards. It's about having people in the parks. As an appetizer, that is the key element. Parks are great if people visit. They stay and then they come back. Not if they win awards. If in addition they win, okay, that's nice, but it's about that. And of course, it's not only about doing large parks. We did hundreds of small parks, mostly in some of the poorest areas of the city. Because it's about being equity. Everybody in the city should have a park within close distance, especially the low-income areas. Because when you live in 35 square meter home or 300 square foot home, you don't live there. You sleep there. You live outside. So in the poor areas of the cities, we need to have better sidewalks and better parks and better bikeways and better connectivity with public transit than even in the wealthy parts of the city. And something else I did, I found a program that had been on for a few years, but it was moving down a few kilometers and a few thousand people. And we turned it into the world's largest pop-up park. And this can be done anywhere. It's really magnificent. How do you do it? Simple. Open streets to people, close them to cars, and the magic happens. Young and old and rich and poor and fat and skinny. Everybody comes out. We did 75 miles, and we still have the same 75 miles. It hasn't grown. By the way, whenever the stars are aligned in your city, whenever you see the mayor or council or the citizens want, do as much as possible. Because you might never know. All of a sudden, when you start thinking, oh, people change, now this is going to increase. No, it has not increased one single mile in the last 20 years. So let's try to do as much as possible whenever you have the possibility. Why is this? In North America, we call it open streets. In Colombia, ciclovia. It has different names. But at the end of the day, it's about opening streets to people and closing to cars. Not all the streets. This is very, very different than a marathon. Because when you do a marathon, and I love marathons, you need to shut down the streets because you're not going to tell runners to stop if the light is red. No, in open street, you do tell people to stop. So the cars can continue to go. You don't shut down the city. And you can do it every Sunday. If you have a winter city, like maybe London, you can do it from April to October. Actually, in Toronto, yesterday we had 20 degrees in November. But anyway, you can do it maybe 8 months of the year. In cities where there is no winter, then you can do it 52 weeks of the year. Well, actually, Paris does it 52 weeks of the year. It's magnificent. You get everybody participating. And why is this important? 1 out of 4 people in Bogota come out. This is important because it changes our minds. All of a sudden, we realize, look at this, the streets. If we look at any city from the air, the streets are the biggest public space. And they belong to everybody. They are public space. And this reminds us of that the streets can have different uses according to the time of the day of the week of the year. It is not just to move cars 24/7. And it can work in small cities, in big cities. I've seen it work in cities of 100,000, of 1 million, of 20 million, like Mexico City. This is about social integration. All of a sudden, everybody gets connected, and that is something that is very important. In India, there are some really, really nice ones. I mean, all over the world, this is Paris. So this is a place where we meet each other as equals. It's kind of like a gigantic equalizer. All of a sudden, the CEOs and the owners of the large corporations, they meet with their minimum wage workers as equals. This is really amazing. One might be using a $5,000 bicycle, the other one a $50 bicycle. It doesn't matter. Bicycles don't differentiate. People are looking at each other from the eye to eye. And this is powerful in any city. Over 300 cities are doing it, but I wish over 1,000 cities we're doing it. Every city, anywhere. Let's do it. Right now, think of COVID. We need to be physically separated. Well, this is magnificent. Do it. Do a pilot for 2 years. Do a 2-year pilot. And in 2 years, you evaluate. If no one is using it, okay, then just open it up back to cars, those miles that you have done. But if people are using it, then you make it permanent every Sunday of the year. When my brother was mayor the first time, he built 175 miles of protected bikeways, separating pedestrians from cyclists, always taking advantage of the rainwater drainage to do them. But the physical separation is critical, as well as making it so that the people riding the bicycles can get faster to places, and doing a network. Some of the neighborhoods where these protected byways have been built are so poor that for you in the UK, it's almost impossible to imagine the levels of poverty. Look at that level of poverty and how it is transformed when you do really good sidewalks or pavement, when you do really good bikeways. And why do you need to do it? Part of it is because it's safer. But just as important is because we need to dignify the people that walk. We need to dignify the people that ride bicycles, and having trees and vegetation and lights and benches, creating a place for everybody. And this is totally doable. And these are some of the examples of being consistent between what you think, what you say, and what you do. And it's about priorities. When I say money is not the issue, well, you got to see the road on the left. It doesn't even have pavement.
Right? Gil?
Yes?
Gil, we can't see your presentation. Are you still sharing your slides?
You are not seeing it?
No, it was open and then it closed, but you were talking so well, I didn't interrupt. But now in the chat.
How long ago was it you haven't seen it?
About 6 minutes.
Oh my God. That's terrible.
Oh, we can hear you really well. Everybody's thumbs upping. We were enjoying it anyway, so don't worry. It's just then you were starting to refer to things, so then we thought lots of hearts and thumbs up. So we don't want you to stop.
Tell me if you see it now.
No, I don't. Maybe just refresh your browser first. Oh, here it is. Yeah, there it is. Okay, and then if you full screen it again.
I'm not gonna talk all of it. I'm just gonna go through some images. Okay, now you see it?
Yes, I do. Can you press? There's a little bar that says hide. Can you see that?
Oh, maybe I clicked that by accident. Hide.
Great,
Oh,
that's good. And yeah, go
okay.
ahead.
No,
You can.
okay, so I'm just gonna go by. This is did you see this park that I said, Simon Bolivar Park?
No.
Okay, this is how when the Pope went, and then for 27 years nothing happened. It was like this, and then all of a sudden, this is how we turned it on. And I mentioned the cave people, the citizens against virtually everything. You see them in London, you see them everywhere, but don't accept no for an answer. We gotta find solutions to the problem, and then this is how I show the park. This is the one that when I was talking about the activities. Look, in 4 years we turned it into this park where people can do all kinds of activities. And this is when I was saying it's not just about active recreation, it's also passive and contemplative, things you can do with thousands of people or things that you can do by yourself or with a friend. So, and I will be talking a lot about parks tomorrow, but I wanted to show you. These are some of the parks that I showed, the hundreds that we did in very poor areas in the neighborhoods, transforming parks. And when I was mentioning that it's even more important to do parks in the poor areas, because people live in very small places, so they don't live there. They sleep. They live is outside. And this is the ciclovia. No, they said an image is worth 1,000 words. How could I, in words, explain this beauty? So I'm just going very fast on this because you have seen it. Oh, but let me go back to this one. These are the colors by income level. So you see how my main objective was how to connect the poorest parts of the city with the wealthiest parts. And it's something that any city can do anywhere in the world. 1 out of 4 people come out every Sunday. It's magnificent. And this is the streets, our biggest place. So these are some of the examples of cities. New York, this is in Toronto, Delhi, Paris. Paris has some of the best ones. How we meet each other as sequels and over 100,000. And these are some of the protected byways, the 175 miles that were done when my brother was mayor. But this is, I'm glad that, Christine, that you mentioned, because it's important for people to see this level of poverty, because it's almost hard to imagine in London that some people have, and the impact of having good bikeways and good sidewalks. Part of it is because it's safer, but also because we need to dignify the people that walk or the people that bike. And the dignity is also critical. And also from the point of view of placemaking, it's not just about doing the bikeway or the sidewalk. It's about putting plants that are good for the microclimates, and putting lights, and putting benches, and putting get-togethers, and putting playgrounds every few blocks, and so on. So we need to create places everywhere, especially, and we need to be consistent. So I think that this is more or less where I was at the time. There are many ways to separate the cyclists from the cars, but there will be a physical separation. If there is not a physical separation, people are not going to use it. So we need to have areas for people to walk, for people to bike, and for people to go on their cars. And this afternoon, when I'm talking about people walking, I'm talking about anybody that moves at the speed of the pedestrians. And then when my brother was mayor, he also said, when he was started talking about a bus rapid transit, this used to be a transportation system. People didn't think it could happen. And in 36 months, he went from idea to implementing the first line. Buying and expropriating houses along the way to be able to do the sidewalks and the bikeways, the parks and the plazas. This bus rapid transit moves more people than 90% of the subways of the world, their main line. And by the way, in London, so more people are moved by buses than by underground. Also build the first cable to some of the people that live in the mountains, very poor areas, and purchase 600 electric buses and 1,441 new 2 and 3 bodies. Why am I mentioning Bogota? When it's obviously not the ideal city. It's to show that it's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's not. These are not technical issues. These are not financial. These are political issues. This is about policy. So we need to work on this. But let's leave Bogota behind and let's talk about other things. Let's create 880 cities. I've been lucky. In the last years, I have been founder and chair of 880 cities for the last 14 years. And also I was chair of Waterbank Parks. Now I'm ambassador. And I've been able to work in over 300 different cities. World Urban Parks, basically, we think that everybody should have access. People can become members of World Urban Parks individually, or by city, or by university, or by hospital. We have people from all over. We got different World Congress, like we had in Melbourne and then in Kazan. It was Tirana this year. We're having a virtual one in the next 3 weeks. And then next year, Guadalajara. We have different committees where you can be part of it, children and older adults and large parks, healthy parks, and so on. If you want any more information, you can go to World Urban Parks. But people always, wherever I go, people say, Gil, what's 880 Cities? What is it? Well, 880 Cities is really not about walking or cycling or streets or parks. Those are the means, not the end. The end is how can we have successful cities? And to go when we could travel, I used to go to places where I was going to speak. Here I was going to speak in Warsaw outdoors. And I went the night before and I saw all these people dancing. Look, what a great place. This is about place. We need to be flexible on how we use this place where people were dancing the night before I was going to speak the following night. And I see all of these people, I say, oh my God, I'm going to compete. And I saw the DJ Vika. She's a businesswoman. We're living longer. The majority of businesses are being started by people over 60. She has all of the sound equipment and goes from city to city, from park to park, organizing these dances. So this is the idea. How can we contribute to create healthier communities where people are going to live healthier and are going to be happier? And people say, Gil, can my children bike to school? Can my grandparents walk to the public transit? Can I ride their bike to get eggs or milk? 3 simple steps. We call it the rule of common sense. Unfortunately, common sense seems to be the least common of the senses. Step number 1, think of a child around 8 years old that you love. Your daughter, your son, your grandchildren, your nephews, your neighbors. Once you have the child in mind, step number 2, think of an 80 that you love. Maybe your parents, your grandparents, your brothers, your sisters. And once you have the child and the adult in mind, then go to number 3. Would you send them walking across the intersection? Would you send them riding their bike to school or to get eggs or milk, or walking to take public transit? Would they feel safe? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not. And we got to do it better. What if everything that you did in London, the crosswalk, the restaurant, the school, the library, the pavement, everything, the businesses, everything in London had to be great for an 8 and an 80-year-old. Not 8 to 80, 8 and 80 as an indicator species. Because if it's good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, it's going to be good for everywhere from 0 to over 100. We need to stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic. And let's build great cities for all. That is the magic of 880 cities. It's a simple but powerful concept. 3, let's move on sustainable mobility. And when I'm talking about sustainable mobility, I refer to people walking and riding bicycles and using public transit. And also new uses of cars. I mean, walking and cycling is not a joke. This could be any city in England or anywhere in the world where people can walk or bike safely. Walking and cycling is not a frivolity, as this little girl will tell us. Walking and cycling are the only individual mode of mobility for most people. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for all children and youth in the world. In London, if you're under 16, you might be the son or the daughter of the wealthiest person in the UK. Your only individual mode of mobility is to walk and to bike. So it should be almost like a human right to have safe and enjoyable places to walk and to bike. Unless you think that only the people who have the money and the age and the desire to have a car have a right to individual mobility. That's why we're also talking about democracy and human rights, equality and sustainability. That's why my friend Yang says that to have a great city, we should have almost like as a goal. In this city, everything will be done to invite people to walk and bike as much as possible in the course of their daily doings. It's as a normal part of everyday life. How do we want to live? We need to have that built environment around that. Walking. Why is walking so important? Because every single trip begins and ends by walking. We walk to the places. We walk to the bike. We walk to the cars. We walk to public transit. That's how we were created. Just like the birds fly, people also. Christine, do you?
I see it. You look.
Hello?
I see it.
Okay.
Good. Keep going.
You see the bird?
I see the bird.
Okay, it's just birds fly, deer run, and people walk. But then it doesn't wanna. Okay.
Does that bird not want to fly?
Yeah, somehow it's happening with the bird. Let me refresh this. Okay.
Okay.
People walk. People walk. We walk in the middle of the winter with our babies on their carriages. And maybe what makes us so happy about walking is that we use all our senses. We see the children playing and the youth in Joburg walking to school. We hear the birds singing. We go in front of a coffee place and we smell the aroma of the coffee place. Parents and children walk. Grandparents walk. We walk in the summer. We walk in the winter. We walk everywhere, but we need to make it safe. And it's not safe today. As an example, yesterday, people walking were killed by people driving cars, 741 people. Yesterday, just in one day, and today, another 741. And tomorrow, another 741. A little over a year ago, 2 planes crashed, and everybody died. Everybody died. What happened? We grounded the 737s all over there are no 737s flying. Well, every single the people that are being killed by drivers using cars is the same as 5 Boeing 737s. 5 Boeing yesterday, 5 today, 5 tomorrow. And we know how to stop this massacre, but we're not doing enough. They are not accidents. They are incidents because they can be avoided. Vision Zero. Vision Zero is saying it started in Sweden. It basically says people are not perfect. So we need to develop the speed and the engineering and so that everything will be according. In England, there is a wonderful movement of 20 is plenty for us. Why 20? It's not because it sounds cute, the 20. It's because it's safe. But some cities approve Vision Zero, but then they don't put the money or the actions. So it's not Vision Zero, it's zero vision. We know how to do the streets. We know how to do the speed. If we're going to improve walking, we need to lower the speed, like the movement in England. Why 20 miles an hour? Not because it sounds cute, 20 is plenty. It's because if you get hit by a car at 20 miles an hour, there is only 5% probability of being killed. At 40 miles, it's more than 80%. So it's up to the leaders, up to the elected officials and city staff. How many people do you want killed in incidents on the streets? If people are moving at 20, you are going to get so many. At 25, so many. At 30, at 40, at 50. So whatever speed limit you put, whatever engineering you do on the roads, if you leave the turning at 90 degrees or you cut the corners, you are going to have more people killed, more people injured. So it's a political decision, the speed limit and so on. So we need to decide how do we want that. It's the speed matters. It's tremendously important. This is really an issue of life and death. If we have a small island in the crosswalk, we eliminate more than half of the incidents. Why are we still doing crosswalk with our islands? The children are going on a field trip. They're going to the museum. Not all of them cross at the same time. So then some wait in the island for the second light. So they cross the light in two lights. They'll cross the intersection. This should be normal anywhere in the world. And we need to think always of the little kids. And we need to think of parents and babies. And we need to think of older adults who are living longer. So we need to have cities that are good for everybody. And we need to make it a priority. And it's not a priority when we put posts in the middle of the sidewalk or when we allow cars to go on the sidewalks. It doesn't make any sense. Sometimes we don't even build sidewalks. We're telling this woman, every single day you are a second-class citizen. This doesn't make any sense. So many streets, we don't even do sidewalks. Imagine in the middle of the winter with snow, with ice, that person slips and falls and might be killed by a driver with a car. If there wasn't a sidewalk, well, it might hurt, but it's not going to risk killing himself. I mean, the sidewalks that in London you call them pavement is the most important infrastructure in any city. I mean, when you're on the road, on a bicycle, on cars, on public transit, you're moving from point A to point B, not on the sidewalk or the pavement. Here, people meet boyfriends and girlfriends. We meet our neighbors. We meet the people selling fruits and vegetables. When the people selling fruits and vegetables, we develop a sense of belonging. When we go to any city, we leave the bag somewhere and we go out on the sidewalks. The sidewalk, we use them in the summer. We use them in the winter. We use the sidewalks. The children catch Pokemons on the sidewalks. We catch public transit on the sidewalks. The sidewalks is really the life of the city. We say, oh, I'm going to go for a coffee. And we take 45 minutes because we walk, we sit, we watch people go by. We have a conversation with someone that we don't even know. It's really, we develop that sense. And that has a lot to do also with mental health. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about the impact of the public space on mental health, because this is about it. It's about having multiple micro social encounters. It's not about just having one best friend. No, in addition of having one best friend, it's about having many of these social encounters. The sidewalks reminds us that walking is much more than walking. The sidewalk, when I walk in Buenos Aires, I enjoy seeing the people dancing tango on the sidewalks. It's almost part of the family of the parks, much more than of public works. Working in some neighborhoods of social housing in Mexico, I saw some of these sidewalks where it looked like a roller coaster. Every few meters, it has an up and down, up and down. And obviously, people like this woman, she's risking her life and her baby's life because she's not going to go on this roller coaster. Putting up lights, but then in the middle of some very narrow sidewalks. But it's not just low-income areas. Look, last year I was working in New Mexico in the U.S. and I saw some brand new sidewalks, and I thought it was, oh, how cool they're putting lights on the sidewalks, but how not so cool that they're putting in the middle of the sidewalk. Imagine a person on a wheelchair, or people chatting, or little kids, or someone with a stroller. Brand new sidewalks on the neighborhood. This is 2020. This was done in 2019. And look at the same roller coasters. And then the people in the city said, oh, but they are approved. I said, I don't know if they're approved or not. But if they're approved, you got to change the norms. Because, by the way, it's a lot cheaper to do the sidewalk perfectly flat, where the car that has to go in or out once or twice a day, if you have car, is the one that has to go up and down. It's not the pedestrian like a roller coaster. I mean, we really have to raise the level of importance of sidewalks everywhere. But of course, sustainable mobility is not just walking. Sustainable mobility is also riding bicycles. It's using public transit. It's new uses of cars. And this could be any community in the UK or anywhere in the world, or children going to school when we have no weather. You know, this is in Copenhagen. Why do people bike in Copenhagen? Because it's safe, it's connected, and it's inexpensive. I mean, the car was taking over Copenhagen and Amsterdam everywhere in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And then they went through a crisis similar to what we have today, the oil crisis. And then people couldn't use their cars on weekends. People couldn't use sometimes on even days or odd days. And they started riding bikes, and then it became very dangerous. So then they started building infrastructure. And from a very small percentage, all of a sudden now, people are riding bikes in the summer, in the winter, safe, connected, inexpensive. Don't just do one bikeway and think that people are going to use it. If it doesn't connect origins and destinations, it's not going to click. So we need to make it safe for everyone. And just like Copenhagen, any city, this is not rocket science. Any city, anywhere in the world can do it, small ones and big ones. And you got to think of the summer and the winter and the rain and the snow and the daytime and the nighttime. And Copenhagen, they say there's no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. And also, no such thing as bad weather is bad infrastructure. When we have good infrastructure, people put on the proper clothing. In Copenhagen, it's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer, it rains all year round, and people walk and people bike, people of all ages and backgrounds. Today, 41 out of 100 trips are done on a bike in Copenhagen. And it's not because they are poor, they have a very standard of living, very high quality of life, very high level of happiness. And they want to go to 50%. Men don't need wash shirts in summer, women don't need special shoes, and people bike. And they separate. The way they separate there is level for the cars, about 3 inches higher for bikes and 3 inches higher for people walking. And they continue to improve, and they continue to have some that where all the traffic lights are the speed of the bicycles, and doing new bridges and new connections and counting. Look at this. When I took this photo, 16,000 cyclists had gone by, because that counter goes to 0 at midnight. And this was 8 p.m., 4 degrees. This is how people move in Copenhagen. Imagine if we're going to double the population living in cities, what if our goal was that this was the mode of mobility for those 3.5 billion people that are going to be living in cities? I mean, if we're going to put bikeability, just think about it. If it's not safe for an 8 and an 80-year-old, it's nothing. It's nothing. Don't even call it a bikeway. It's just paint on the street. It's nothing. Always think of the children. Always think of them. And look at this footpath. It continues straight on the intersection. The cars turn are the ones that have to go up or down. It's not the pedestrian. If you are going with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your spouse, and holding hands, you don't have to stop every 100 meters. No, you continue. It's the cars that are turning, the one that change. Don't do byways thinking of the 30 to 50-year-old in spandex. Think of the little kids. This is not safe for them. It's not safe. Think of immigrants that come from countries where cycling is not part of the culture. Think of the elderly in their tricycles. I mean, to make it safe, you must lower the speed everywhere. The default speed in all of the neighborhoods should be 20 miles an hour or 30 kilometers an hour, everywhere, except the arterials, the big roads that might be 40. But nevertheless, and the second, we need to develop a network of protected bikeways. This is the only way to increase cycling. It's not about putting signs. It's not about doing maps. It's not putting racks on the buses. It's not about putting parking. No, all of that is nice for the people that are already cycling. But to get more people cycling, it's only these two. And everything I said about 20 miles an hour for walking is the same thing for cycling. So I'm going to jump into the network. We need a minimum network. Ideally, all of the arterials should have bikeways. But the minimum is, okay, in the short term, let's develop a network, a grid where people can go from anywhere of AAA bikeways. What's AAA? It's for all ages and all abilities. But we need connectivity. If there is no connectivity, it's not going to click. And then when it clicks, it's wonderful. I took these photos in Helsinki at minus 30 degrees. All of this was ice, and people were biking to work, to shop, to different places. We're going to think of daytime and nighttime and the doors opening. And if you don't want to do it permanent like this one in Paris, okay, you can do it like New York, but don't just paint. Enhance that painted line with plastic bollards every 6 feet or every 2 meters. And then people are going to feel safe. That's why people bike in Copenhagen, because there is connectivity. All of the neighborhoods, low speed. And all of the arterials, a wonderful network of AAA bikeways. And this is doable anywhere. This is what we should be doing. And now during COVID, we should be saying where people need to be physically separated. We should be creating corridors everywhere. I mean, also, I said it's not just walking and cycling, also public transit. My brother says a civilized city is the one where the poor have cars. It's the one where the rich use transit. We need to have quality public transit. In some places it's buses, in others it's light. Also, it's marketing. A mayor told me in Malmo, the citizens didn't like the buses, so then he put a nose on the bus, he the wheels, and now they look like trains. So let's have buses. If people like it more like this, okay, have them like that. For public transit to work, we need to have speed, connectivity, and frequency. If we don't have speed, connectivity, and frequency, people are not going to switch. So let's make sure that we have those. And people say, but where am I going to have the physical space for public transit? Well, do the mobility math. Do you want one of these or 140 of those? Do you want one of these or 145 of those? About democracy. This is about equity. This is about allowing people, those people on the buses, 100 people on a bus should have the right of space, 100 cars with one person. And rapid transit is not wheels are rubber or metal. Rapid transit is if they have dedicated lanes. We need to have dedicated lanes everywhere, networks of dedicated buses. And in addition, we need to have repairs and easy quick and out and traffic signal priority. Dedicated lanes is critical for public, for bus rapid transit to work. And obviously, walking and transit takes a lot less space. I mean, I'm not saying this is the end of the car industry, but the way we use cars is changing very, very fast. There are many uses. Now we have electric cars, we got hydrogen cars, we are going to have driverless cars soon. And people say, oh, many scenarios, they draw space for everyone. No, and they say with driverless cars, we're not going to have traffic jams. We forget that the congestion is not the car. The congestion is the car, sorry, the congestion is the car. It's not the driver. So if we don't change our behavior, we are going to have the same traffic jams. We change. Also now, even during COVID, we're buying so many things through the internet, but then they are not delivered through the internet. So we got to realize that having trucks in the neighborhoods is not the best way to get into a neighborhood. That's why many of these companies are hiring thousands and thousands of people with bicycles to do the last mile. We need to change also how we distribute the things that people are buying. So it can be great or it can be horrible. It's up to all of us. How we do. We must change how we live and how we move. In a couple of minutes, we're going to do an exercise on impatience and orchids. But before that, I want you to start getting into the mood we need to recreate the cities for all people. You know, it's almost, there are some ingredients. It's almost like if you're going to do a pasta. You boil water, you put on the pasta, and then you get a spiceless pasta if you don't put anything else. So you better have options. You either get ingredients or people and do it really, really nice, or people are going to go somewhere else. So you get the ingredients, you do a nice pasta, and people are going to love it. So having vibrant and healthy communities also has some ingredients. The one that we're talking about, walking and cycling and transit. The ones we're going to talk about tomorrow, the parks, the streets. These are the spices. So think about the spices of your city. There's spice city and spiceless city. No one wants to live in a spiceless city. People are saying, oh, this is the end of the cities. No. Come on. The great cities, actually more and more people will want to go. Hopefully, some of the wealthy will leave so that the prices of real estate will come down and more young and more people with high incomes will be able to come to the cities. But the great cities that have great parks and restaurants and shops and libraries and public spaces, my God, they're going to thrive more than ever. But don't do it spiceless. Look, let me show you an example. This is a spiceless city. This building has won a lot of awards, but it's horrible. If you go to a city you don't know anybody, would you go here for the first time? Or to this street? This is a spice. Wonderful. There's wonderful street furniture, the flowers, the fruit. There are chairs and tables and lights and trees. There's a difference. This is, some people have gigantic parking that are used one day a week. Some others use those parking 24/7. You know, it's not about money. This park costs a lot of money. What do you do here? Nothing. You come here once, you take photos, you never go back. This one costs very little, but you keep coming because every hour is different people, different activities. So it's a lot of spice park. So I hope that you get the feeling of spice communities. So how do you want London and all other communities where people are from on this webinar? So we're going to do now to end a small group work, and we're going to take some questions. In the small work group, we are going to work on impatience and on orchids. What is impatience? Impatience are these beautiful flowers that are very easy to grow, are very inexpensive. So even if you don't know about gardening, you plant it and it will grow. It's low cost, low risk, but high visibility. And these are orchids. Orchids are more expensive, are more difficult to grow. So you need to plan a lot more. So I want you to think on things that you could do in the city that are impatience, that we could do now in the next 12 months, from November to November, that are low cost, that are low risk, and that have high visibility. You don't need to get approval. You don't need to change the laws. You don't need to do something that is gigantic. Low cost, low risk, and high visibility. There are many, many things. Let me give you an example. The other day I was in a city and someone raised their hand and said, "Oh, I'll give you an impatient. When I'm walking on the sidewalks or the pavement, it's very dark." I said, no, but putting lights on the sidewalk or pavement, it's expensive. And she said, no, it's not expensive. When I'm walking, the sidewalks or pavement is very dark, but the streets are very well lit. All I'm asking is for someone to go up on a ladder, get the light, turn it 90 degrees, and have light over the street and over the sidewalk and the pavement. Same light, same cable, same bulb, same everything. So that is the idea. Low cost, low risk, high visibility. And the orchids is what can you do in the next 2 to 5. I don't go beyond 5 because if you really want to do it, you can do it in 5 years. Otherwise, it's because you don't want to do it. But it might be more expensive. You might need to change the law. You might need to do fundraising. You might need to go to get permission from city council. So that is the basic difference on the two. This one is low cost, low risk, high visibility. You can do it in the schools. You can do it in the neighborhoods. You can do it anywhere. Or the orchids that are higher cost. So that is the idea of the two of them. Keep in mind when we're thinking of this crisis of COVID is also an opportunity. Look, some of the things with fewer cars, look what people are doing around the world. This is in Dublin, this is in London, in Berlin. Look at the things that people are doing. All of a sudden, things that would have taken years, now it's taking weeks, it's taking months. In Tirana, in Albania, they have done a network. In Paris, all over the world, people are transforming. This is not about the money. People used to say, "Oh, we cannot do it. It's too hard, or we don't have the money, or it's a technical issue." And all of a sudden, in Paris, they're doing 150 additional miles. It's also turning streets into walking places. We need to be physically active for our mental health, our physical health, but we need to be physically separated, but socially integrated. And it's not just Paris. Look at Auckland, New Zealand, what they did. Look at Oakland, California. In one day, in 24 hours, the mayor created 72 miles of slow streets. Only the people that live in the street can drive, and only at 5 miles an hour. Only the people that live in the street. If not, you got to use the arterials. The neighborhood streets are not streets to cut through the neighborhoods. No. You gotta go on the arterial. If there is a traffic jam, you stay in the traffic jam in the arterial. You don't go through neighborhood. The neighborhood is only for the people that live there. So now there is no noise. It's safe. You see children playing. You see people with disabilities, people that are blind or deaf, or people on wheelchairs. People are creating bus lanes, like the BRT system, lanes dedicated for buses. People are doing markets on the streets to be separated, but to have the markets. In San Francisco, in one day, the mayor turned 9 golf courses into public parks, because in golf course, you can have 200 people playing, 200 people max, only the good months of the year for weather. On a public park, you have thousands and thousands, 365 days of the year. Imagine, it's almost unethical to have urban inside the city golf courses when you have lack parks on green spaces. So all of a sudden, the impossible became possible. So I want you to think of that, because we can do it as we do this exercise. So now I want to know one or two questions, and then we go into this.
Gil, you've got some questions, so I'm going to put them to you. There's a question here from Mawati Prabhu. How were you able to win support for public infrastructure like parks and bike lanes, as opposed to housing, commercial developments, and things that bring in more business revenues? So do you want me to repeat that? How are you able to win support?
No, I got it. Do you see me now? I stopped sharing. Do you see my screen?
No, I don't see your screen. I see you.
Oh, yeah, you see me. Perfect. Okay, and then when we do the exercise, I'll put up the screen on being patient and orchids. Well, to get support, first, change is hard. Tomorrow we'll talk about change. Change is hard. Change is not, 3 recommendations. Change is not unanimous. So don't let elected officials say, "Oh, not everyone is on board." It will never be everybody on board. But So it's not unanimous. Second, the general interest must prevail over particular. So for example, how can you justify to have 60 people on a bus going on the lanes behind cars with one person? That's not democratic. The 60 people on the bus should have the right of space of 60 cars with one person. And also, remember, the cost of doing nothing is not nothing. We have this window of opportunity to do a lot of changes. And the other thing that we'll talk a lot about tomorrow is on the benefits. The benefits. Focus on the benefits. It's not about bikeways. It's not about parks. Those are the means, not the end. The end is mental health. The end is economic development. The end is happiness. The end is physical health. The end is a lot of these issues. So we need to focus on the benefits. And we need to decide for different people, there are different benefits. Maybe for a mayor, for some councilor, they care about economic development. So we're going to tell them why we have parks is going to be good for economic development. But another mayor doesn't care about economic development, is focused on mental health. So let's have why is mental health. So we got to have like on the pocket 5 cars or more with benefits. To each benefit have the reasons why. So focus on the benefit. Don't get yourself, we gotta have bikeways because bicycle is cleaner. No. Focus on the benefit. What matters to your citizens or what matters to your elected officials? The benefit.
There's a question from Catherine Max about the importance you mentioned of addressing inequalities. And it says, what sort of changes do you recommend in terms of addressing that?
Well, first, let's use these magnifying glasses that COVID has given us. Like the people that are dying. Mostly people say, oh, in New York, the Hispanics and the black people are dying of higher than the proportion of the population. It's not because they are black or they are Hispanic. It has nothing to do. It's because they are poor. The wealthy Hispanics, the wealthy blacks are working from home. But the poor people in New York and in every city, 90% of the low-income people need to work outside of their homes. So let's focus on the issues of equity. Let's not change the conversation. The issue of poor is absolutely critical. So whatever we do, for example, sometimes people in low-income areas, they said, oh, we should not do parks because they have so many needs of health and education. Yeah, they need health and education, but they need just as much parks. Because parks is going to improve their physical health and mental health and level of happiness. And also in low-income areas, people tend to live more crowded. In one condo, instead of living one person in the same, you got 4 or 5 people, or small places. So you don't live there, you sleep there. So you need to, in the low-income areas, you need better sidewalks and pavement, more parks, more bikeways, more connectivity. So I think that we need to address, because so far we've been just talk. In most places, we have not placed enough emphasis on equity. And equity should be like an umbrella. Health and equity should be an umbrella on everything that we do. That's a critical question, and that's a very important one, and we need to work on that. Keep in mind, all of a sudden in England, you were going to do in London the Olympic Games, and all of a sudden you found $1,000 per every citizen in London. You know, after getting all the tickets to the games, after getting all the sponsorship, after getting all the money, each citizen in London is paying $1,000. So all of a sudden, when the city decided they wanted to do the Olympics, they found $1,000. Imagine if all of a sudden the city also found for every man, woman, and child in London. Imagine if all of a sudden you said, okay, let's find another $1,000, but it's to eradicate poverty or to create sustainable mobility. So we need to refocus our priorities. Here in Toronto, this mayor is moving an elevated highway, crazy, in 2020, moving an elevated highway that is costing $2.8 billion. So we need to change. We need to be very loud and clear about equity and sustainability, about people living healthier and happier, or things are not going to change. Because in the last 40 years, overwhelmingly has not changed.
There was one other question/clarification, which was around, you mentioned managing things differently. We need to change the way we manage. What did you mean by that?
Well, by management is that sometimes people only focus on the infrastructure. For example, the best cost benefit in a park, the infrastructure, is a walking path. And then people say, oh, we have the walking path. And I say, yeah, but we need to have people walking. The segment of population that uses parks the least are the older adults. Why? Because there's almost nothing for older people to do in the parks. So we need to organize walking groups. It's not just doing the walking paths. People say, oh, I see people walking. Yeah, you see the few that are walking. You don't see the many that are not. So the success of parks are the activities, are the programs. So just the same way that we're thinking of programs for children and for youth, we also need to think of programs for older people. It's a full 1/3 of our lives. Over 60, 1/3 of our lives, and we must live healthy and happy, but we are not working on that. But also for children, look, we tend to think that Sweden is almost like paradise. Well, I was very surprised when I've been working with the parks people in Sweden to know that the park users, the boys use more parks 3-1 to girls. Why? Because there are more activities for boys to do, infrastructure and programs, than for girls. So that is part of the management to realize. But if we don't count, then we don't know that is happening. And maybe we have too many men designing parks, maybe too many men doing the senior management of park systems, and maybe we need more women so that they see these kind of issues. So that's part of the management, and we'll spend a little bit of time, because creating a place is not only about the infrastructure, but it's about the uses. It's not only about having volunteers if we don't give the volunteers the tools. It's not only about asking citizens, but once the park is done, we do a big party to invite people. No, we need to ask citizens before we have even drawn the first line. What do they want during and after? It's about, that is the management. Management, sometimes cities confuse management and maintenance. The only thing is that they both start with an M. But maintenance, picking up the garbage and cutting the grass, is 20% of management. These other things that I'm talking about is the other 80%. And we'll see lots of examples tomorrow.
So we're going to go to the workshop, or the element of we're going to send people to their tables to write down a list of impatiens and orchids that they could do. You've got about 10 minutes left in the session. So we're not actually going to come back into the main stage after you do that activity, but we're back here tomorrow at 2:00. So we may ask you to feedback some of the things that you learn now. So Gil, while you guys are sent into the lounge, you can join a table. Please do. The tables are about 5 people per table, and then you'll be working together. So yes, round of applause, please, for Gil Penalosa. And Gil, do you have any final instructions before we send them to the lounge?
No, please go to the lounge and share with others. And also think about this, and permanently, and also when you do meetings with the community, with your community, about how to improve your pavement, your sidewalk, your crosswalk, your park, your schools, think about these issues, the impatiens and the orchids. Impatiens is things you can do now. They are very, very important, because sometimes people start with the element that is most expensive, most difficult. And if that fails, everything fails. But if you start with things that are low cost, low risk, and high visibility, this will give you the oxygen and the credibility to tackle orchids that are higher cost, that maybe you need to change the laws. And tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, London time, when we begin, we're going to get input from you. We're going to ask you to share some of the impatiens that you thought of, and some of the orchids that you thought of for your community. They can be about walking or cycling or parks or places.
No more clues. We've got to send them. No more clues. You're going to send you guys to do the work. But we'll see you back here tomorrow at 2:00. Thank you very much, Gil, for a brilliant part 1. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And do go and grab a seat, because you're going to be asked by Gil tomorrow what you came up with. So goodbye, everyone.